All right, so we're going to pick up with, or where we left off with proportions, and now we're going to talk, ratios, and now we're going to talk about what a proportion is. A proportion is a statement that two comparison statements are equal. And we usually write a proportion in fraction form, comparing A is to B, C is to D is how you would read this right here. So to solve a proportion, you can use your proportional reasoning, just like we talked about earlier, like this times 3 is that, that times 3 is that. Or you can also set equal the cross products, which is a fancy way of saying you cross multiply. So every proportion has two cross products. You have the means and the extremes. And these are called the extremes. Don't ask me where they got those names, but A times D is the product of the extremes, and B times C is the product of the means. And so sometimes you'll hear another way of saying you cross multiply is you say the product of the means equals the product of the extremes. So, and this extremes was just supposed to go there, and means supposed to go there. All right, so you guys have done this before. So when you cross multiply, 6 times 3 is 18x. And we have 4 times 27 is 108. And we divide both sides by 18. And x equals 6. Right? So same thing in part B. The only thing that's a little bit more exciting is you get to set up the problem yourself. So the ratio of the width to the height, so just like we talked about before, width comes first, so it's our numerator, height comes second, so it's our denominator. So width to height of a window is 2 to 7. So 2 goes on top, 7 goes on bottom. The width of, I can't read what that says, of the window is 3 feet, right? And solve the proportion to find the height. Maybe that was 6. Okay, I think that just says the width of the window is 3 feet. So how we're going to do this is, since we're doing width to height, we got to make sure that our width is on top in both and our height is on bottom in both. And so your width over here is 3. It says write and solve a proportion to find the height. So our height we don't know, so we're going to call that x. So when we cross multiply, 3 times 7 is 21. 2 times x is 2x. Divide both sides by 2. And x equals 10.5. And that would be your height. And we know it's feet because those were the units we were using, 10 feet. All right, so you try. So pause the video here, write your proportion, and solve it. Ready? You try. Okay, so again, male to female, that's our clue that we need to do males in the numerator, females in the denominator. And since over here it says males are 18, we make sure that we put that on top. And we cross multiply. 18 times 4 gives us the 72. Divide both sides by 3, because 3 times x was 3x. And x equals 24 females. So let's take a look at another one. The ratio of male to female students in the Harry Potter Club is 2 to 3, male to female. This one's a little bit different. Because before we did 2 to 3, male to female, but there are 60 students total is a little bit different, right? So this time, instead of comparing male to female, we're comparing two parts and a whole. So when we think about two parts and a whole, it's back to the same strategy we used with the triangles and the rectangles before. We know that sum 2 times something plus 3 times something will equal 60 total. Again, we're thinking of it as the ratio was 2 to 3, and together these numbers used to equal 60 before they were reduced. Used to be times some number. There was something over here that really added up to 60. So anyway, you can solve it algebraically by saying 5x equals 60, dividing both sides by 5, and x equals 12. But that doesn't actually give you your answer. Your answer is 2 times 12. When you plug it back in, is 24 males. And 3 times 12, when you plug it back in, there were 36 females. Okay, so the last thing we're going to look at here is just a comparison real quick of what does it mean to be a ratio versus what does it mean to be a proportion. So keep in mind, a ratio, friends, is just one fraction. But a proportion is two fractions. It's two equivalent fractions, actually. In a ratio, it's important that your numerator and denominator, if you're going to compare those two things, then it would only make sense that they have the same units, right? Remember, cup to gallon, that's great, but that doesn't really compare how big one is compared to the other until we convert it all to ounces. But keep in mind, in a proportion, we had different units, right? We had females and males. Did we have anything else? Do we have like feet and inches or anything? I don't know that we did. But they can have different units in the numerator and denominator on a proportion. So with a ratio, we had to use conversion factors in order to get it all to one unit. In a proportion, we cross multiply in order to solve for the missing part. And then here's some example of what each would look like. So the first one, you would just, there's 2 feet, so I'm going to convert that to inches. So there's 12 inches in a foot. And so, and remember, in a foot, remember when you convert, you have to put your units catty corner from each other so that they cancel out, like so, because one's in the numerator, one's in the denominator. So you end up with 1 to 24 would be your ratio. Over here, we would cross multiply. 3 times 12 is 36. X times 6 is 6x. And so x would equal 6. Okay, you have some bookwork down here. This bookwork is not going to be due until after test day, so that's like next Wednesday, I believe. And then I'm also going to have you look at the key to the notes for the similar polygons. It's a little more straightforward lesson, so I don't think you necessarily need me to video record that whole lesson. The key is on the haiku, and you can just look at that lesson and the key, and I think you'll get the examples just fine. So I will see you guys on Tuesday. I will be there Tuesday morning at 7:30 if you need any help, as well as on Monday. Okay, bye guys.